Hi, I'm David Korn.
And I'm Jim Pinkerton.
Together?
And together we're bloggingheads.tv.
Something.
back for the first time in quite a while.
Yeah, I feel very rusty doing this. You know,
let's hope we get the lens cap off.
Yes. Yeah. I'm just checking there. It does seem to be recording.
I had the same thought.
But I still think, and it probably says more about the rest of blogging heads than us, that we're the best. We remain the best dressed people on Blogging Heads TV. Some things never change. But some things do change, Jim.
Yes, they do.
Since we've talked last, we have a presidential field.
We do.
It's, it may be all the presidential field we're going to get to at this stage. We've had two debates in the last week. The presidential
four in the last 3 weeks or so. It was quite a few.
As our resident Republican, although you don't always wear the R proudly, what do you think?
Well, I should say first off, my wife works for Michelle Bachmann, and so
my condolences.
I think she had a good night last night. I think that the meme, the narrative, the whatever you want to call it, the sort of media speak cliche of 24 hours ago, we're doing this. Let's say it's Tuesday morning. It was two-man race, Romney-Perry, and I think last night in Tampa it was seen as a wider race than that. The Republican field
wide enough for Herman Cain.
Wide enough for more than two people. That's for sure. I think almost everybody up there, except maybe Huntsman, could say they had a good night and had some good sound bites and so on, and made some good points. Huntsman was sort of awkward, I thought.
I love the Kurt Cobain reference. That's going to score well with the Republican primary electorate. I tell you, once he starts quoting Pearl Jam, he won't be stoppable.
Yeah, exactly. I rest my case. It's Perry was attacked from all sides, and he didn't do badly. I don't think he made any horrible gaffes, but he was under attack, and Bachmann scored against him on the Gardasil issue, and others scored against him on the border issue. This is, again, the media the media's interests are best served by a wide open competitive race. That makes it newsworthy, right? However, reporters, in their basic instincts to sort of tidy things up, did want to sort of eliminate everybody and just have, they put Romney and Perry against each other in the debate.
To be fair to the conventional wisdom, which I don't always want to be, you had Michelle Bachmann falling precipitously in the polls that people do use to govern some of their assumptions. I mean, in the CNN poll that came out before the debate, she had fallen to below 5%. I mean, she was behind Herman Cain and Newt Gingrich after having won the Ames absurd, false, phony straw poll and being seen as doing well in the first debate and rising in the polls subsequently. So there was some evidence to sort of look at her as a flame out case. Whether attacking Perry on this vaccine issue is going to reignite her and put her back in good company with the Tea Party grassroots, maybe, who knows? I mean, I tend to think, as someone who has done opposition research in the past, that oppo research doesn't really do too much for you. People want to like Perry. If people want to like Perry, they will, regardless of the attacks from Michelle Bachmann. But nevertheless, that was the high moment, one of the high moments of the debate. I thought she was largely absent in the first hour, whether that was Wolf Blitzer's fault or her own fault. But in the last debate, too, she seems to have lost some mojo. But I'd like to ask you about, rather than sort of the up and down, the piece that I've just finished, which we'll get a link on the side, is that I think in these last two debates, there's just been a high amount of lying going on the Republican side.
Okay.
When Governor Perry gets out there and says that the stimulus created no jobs, 0 jobs, that is a demonstrably false statement.
How is it demonstrably false?
Created
because the CBO said so.
You can go. You have not passed a highway site that's funded by the Recovery Act.
Okay. I think they mean net jobs.
No. He said it's created 0 jobs.
Well,
he doesn't say that. He says 0 jobs.
I'll speak for him. It's demonstrably true that the
what do you mean?
Obamanomics over the last 2.5 years
stick to his statement. He says it's created 0 jobs. Not net. He says 0 jobs. That's what he says. Is that a true statement?
Well, look, no, because cylindering.
Okay, so it's not a true statement.
Hold on, but I don't think that's what Perry meant.
Well, what he meant? He has said this repeatedly. It's created 0 jobs.
I think he means on net. I don't think he denies. And I'm not supporting Perry, but the point is,
well, why would he not say net jobs? What does net jobs even mean?
I think net. It's just an extra little word that just gets in the way of a clear message.
If
Obama hires his daughter,
it may not have created as many jobs as you'd like, but to say it's created no jobs.
Well, but let's just say for fun, yes, the government created a bunch of mostly fake jobs.
What do you mean fake jobs? People are getting paychecks?
Fake jobs, weatherizing school buildings. That's just acorn subsidy. I mean, I'm not
what do you mean? If someone's working, something's getting done, that's a job.
Well, it's a fake job in that it's not going to last, and it represents.
Okay, only jobs that last.
Hold on.
In that case, anybody in media doesn't have a job.
Pardon?
If it's only a job that's going to last, all of us in media don't have jobs.
Well, okay, some jobs which are look. If the government prints money and hands it out, you've created a job. I'll give you that.
Okay,
but it's not. But at the same time, though, you have to observe that under President Obama, the number of jobs in the country, the number of fake and real combined, is down minus 2.5 million.
Yeah, after the Bush-Cheney crash, that's right. We lost 8 million jobs. Most of that entirely before he even came into office, and a few months afterwards.
2.5 million since Obama took office. Net minus.
Yeah, when you go off the cliff, you don't really hit bottom until you hit bottom. It doesn't matter if there's a change of administration when you're halfway down.
Except Jimmy Carter took the economy off a cliff. Then by this time in the Reagan administration, the economy was growing 7% a year.
This is a bigger crash than the Jimmy Carter recession.
I don't think that's true. In fact, I know it's not true. Unemployment peaked in that recession at 10.8. Unemployment peaked at 10.2.
You're still proving my point, Jim. When he says, if Perry wants to make the case you're making that Obama's economic policies weren't as effective as they should have been, then he can say that. But when he says it created 0 jobs, that is a false statement that shows. What does it show? That he's delusional, or that he can't have a sophisticated thought?
Again, at that point in harping us too much, I will say that he means net jobs, and he's right. Absolutely right about net jobs.
I would say you're being very gracious when Michelle Bachmann says, and I'll be gentle here because your wife is working for her, that Barack Obama has told Israel that it has to go back to its, the 67 borders, when what he actually said is that's a starting point for negotiations. Is that, is she not telling or making a inaccurate statement?
No, actually, she was 100% right, and it's actually worse than that.
PolitiFact.com said it was not true.
Okay, if you go back to what Obama said.
Obama told Israel, quote, this is what she said. Obama told Israel, quote, they need to shrink back to their indefensible 67 borders. He didn't say that. He didn't say you have to shrink back to that. He said that's a starting point for negotiation.
No. In that May speech,
We're talking about the May speech. That's right.
Okay, right. He said he said in effect you needed a contiguous Palestinian state between Egypt and Jordan. Not only does that mean the 67 borders, that means a land bridge between the West Bank and Gaza.
He said there was the land swaps. He said it's a starting point. He didn't say this is what you. It's not his position. It's not been the position of any U.S. administration.
Palestinian state.
Yeah. That doesn't have to be 67 borders.
Well, again, if a contiguous state means some connection between the West Bank and Gaza, which cuts Israel in half. That's a fact. That's what Obama said. Now, he doesn't meet, he's not going to stick to that position, obviously.
He didn't say they had to shrink back to their 67 borders.
He said
well, even if he said contiguous, that's not the
same.
same thing. You may, again, this is what you're doing with Perry. You're saying this is the argument that they should be making, but I'm talking about the words they used and what they actually said.
Okay, I think that Obama,
you can attack Obama's speech.
The Bush speech of 2004 basically said go back to the 67 lines, basically, with swaps. And then the Obama speech said the same thing, plus the land bridge. So I mean, this is hair splitting to the extreme. I mean,
he didn't tell them. She said he told Israel to do this. He didn't do it. He didn't tell Israel to do it. That's not. It's not what his position is.
He outlined his goal, and it's basically the 67 lines, only worse. That's all.
Well, I don't think anyone in the administration who works on this issue, who I talked to, believes that that's his policy.
How do you explain the contiguous Palestinian state part? What does that mean?
That's not a 67 border.
Well, but it's a contiguous state. You can't have a contiguous state. I mean, you've cut Israel in half. That's a fact. To create a contiguous Palestinian state is to cut Israel in half.
Right. Well,
right? You can't deny. I mean, folks out there in Bachmann's land, Google the thing. Google Obama and contiguous. You'll see it. Okay. It was quite striking. And these speeches, as David and I both know, aren't delivered unless 5,000 people have read them first, in terms of vetting. And so they clearly were going for something there. That's quite.
Well, let me ask you this: did you hear anything in these two debates that you thought was not accurate?
I mean, I watched them from my couch watching TV. I can't. I mean, I'm sure there were inaccuracies. I just, didn't prepare. We should have talked about this in advance if I was going to get a quiz.
No pop quizzes on Blogging Heads TV. It's just on my mind because this is what I was working on before you courteously called.
I just popped over with my Blogging Heads gig. So David, how do you assess the Obama administration? Now, we haven't talked about this in like 3 months, so what do you think?
Well, I think the debt ceiling became a tar pit for everybody who touched it. I think the administration miscalculated in terms of at the beginning of the year, when talking to Boehner and McConnell, who told them again and again, we understand the debt ceiling is playing with fire. We're going to be responsible, but I don't think they realized, that is the White House, that they didn't control their own caucus. And so they were playing by the old, rules of the game, which was, okay, you deal with the leadership delivers. And in the context of doing that, Obama came up with an idea from a grand bargain. They talked about not having a grand bargain, just doing this and getting this to the side, the debt ceiling, and everything they tried to do, the Tea Partiers said no to, and it made the Republican leadership, and I think it got Obama into this. How long did it start? They started negotiating in beginning of May, so May, June, July. So it was 3 months of complete ugliness, and as I said earlier, it was a tar pit, and they couldn't get out of it. What they're doing now, whether you like it or not, in terms of talking about jobs and growth, is what they really were anticipating starting to do in the spring, and they lost a lot of time. In the meanwhile, it was interesting. If you look back at the December period, the lame duck session, and the tax cut deal that came out that a lot of liberals didn't like. I think at the end of the day it was actually probably a pretty good deal from the White House perspective. The independents reacted, and as did liberals outside of the commentariat, liberal Democratic voters. They reacted really favorably to the tax cut deal, and Obama's numbers went up amongst independents and went up about liberals, and everyone liked. In the polls, they all said they liked the compromise, and I think they liked the fact that Obama was making Washington after the election, and he got walloped, came back and made Washington work, and got some results. Flash forward to to August, and Obama's still trying to be reasonable. He's still trying to cut a deal, cut a compromise, and they eventually cut sort of a bit of a phony compromise that didn't resolve much at the time, other than that the debt ceiling, other than there wasn't a default and more economic collapse. And the independents said, we don't really like this deal. We don't understand it. It just looks everything looks really dumb to us. And Obama, I think at that point, really let the hostage takers, get control of the bus, or if it's Speed 2, the yacht, and drag him to where he didn't want to be. And so now he's climbing out of this hole. And I think the congressional Republicans are doing the same thing, which is why Eric Cantor and John Boehner, they're not going to, pass a lot of what the president wants. But they've been talking in a much more conciliatory tone than they had back in the spring when they were walking out of the negotiation sessions with the president. So, their numbers are far worse. And when I talk to people in the White House, when you hear them on cable TV, if you should happen to watch, and I would say you should watch MSNBC, you would say Fox. But when you hear the White House people out there, they keep saying, well, listen, we ended up coming out less worse than the other side if you look at the polling numbers. And that's true, but the point I make to them is when he runs for re-election in a little over a year from now, he won't be running against Eric Cantor or John Boehner or the Tea Party. He'll be running against the Republican nominee, who, unless it's Michelle Bachmann, and I won't say anything about that, given your family connection. It won't be somebody who was in the middle of all this. It will be somebody who, Mitt Romney or say Rick Perry, who has kept their distance from the tar pit of Washington. And it's they're going to have to try to play this this bank shot of associating them, the nominee, him or her, with what people don't like about congressional Republicans, which is not a direct line of attack. So I think at the end of the day, Obama is in a worrisome position, but he's finally getting to the debate that he wants to have, which is okay, tax cuts for billionaires and millionaires, or investments in programs that will give us some jobs now and growth down the line. And whether you agree with the policy or not, that's the debate he wants to have. That's what he wanted to have early in the year, and they kind of misstepped on the way to initiating that.
Right. 2 points. One, I think it was yesterday's Washington Post had an article, Monday's Washington Post, about the capital gains tax cut, making the point that every billionaire is actually paying 15%, not 38%, not 35%.
Yeah, that was by Steve Muffson and somebody else. Right. It was a great piece.
It was a pretty good article, and so all these tax increases they're talking about are sort of fake tax increases that Warren Buffett won't be paying anyway. As usual, these.
Well, it depends if you raise some of this involves the Bush tax cuts, which lowered capital gain rates, and if you can get those back up, then I
don't think that was part of the. I don't think it's part of the $447 billion package.
Well,
I don't think so. I don't think there's any change in the capital gains tax cut at all.
We'll check that out.
I think it's all breaks and stuff, and I'm just
I think that's part of. I think that is part of the fight. But anyway,
I got the article here, and it's just
because you see that chart they have, and it drops with the Bush tax cut.
Yeah. No, this is Monday's Post, and again, I'm pretty sure there's no tax rate increase for anybody in there at all. So Obama is continuing the brilliant game of.
I'd fact check
talking soak the rich rhetoric while never touching his donor base, and sort of clever because the Republicans will fight him over some tax break for jet fuel for a private jet, and maybe Obama has an issue there. But I think the other question, of course, and maybe larger, is
I want to check on this because I do.
Well, okay,
because if you're looking at the chart, you see a big drop with the Bush tax cut. So
I understand. I'm looking here.
Okay.
Again, this is okay.
I don't have it in front of me.
I do, as a matter of fact, and just happen to be sitting here.
By now, somebody watching this has Googled already and got the answer.
So, yeah, somebody's got a high-tech way to do this. Anyway, well, it will take too long, but it is okay.
But
there is no increase in. There is pardon.
Put the Obama piece aside.
Put the Obama piece aside. The question then is, will in 1948, an embattled incumbent Democratic president faced a raucous, very, very anti-Republican Congress. And yet the nominee facing him was not a member of the Congress at all. It was a rather moderate Republican governor of New York, Tom Dewey. And Truman's genius as a campaigner was to say, look, forget Tom Dewey, who's the guy running against me. I actually want to run against Robert Taft and all the Republicans in Congress. And he pulled it off. He won a victory.
Right. And he started doing that, I think, pretty early on. I mean, I think that's part of the trick here. It has to be seen as a legitimate endeavor, not.
Well, campaigns were different back then, but I mean, the big issue, the biggest thing with life was probably the Taft-Hartley, which was somewhere in 47, and the election was 48. So, I mean, the Truman didn't really start attacking the Congress by name until July of 48, 4 months before the election. But again, things were different, and in vetoing Taft-Hartley, which was overridden by a huge margin, but nonetheless, he sent a signal to labor, which was a big force back then. I'm with you. And rally and had labor sufficient.
And his speeches, if you go back and look at some of the speeches he gave in that period, they were very, very visceral. It's interesting. He talked about, this was probably, I guess, in the August or September period. It would make sense. I don't know for sure, but about the mother who couldn't afford to buy clothes to send her children back to school in, and so it was. He made he obviously made a connection that worked. So right. I mean, I think in all politics, while everything is indeed calculated to an extent, there has to be a visceral, authentic quality to it, so that people don't, dismiss it right off as an election year gimmick.
Right. Well, that's Obama for you, Mr. Authentic. I mean, I think we haven't even talked about Drew Weston and Maureen Dowd. Over the summer, Maureen Dowd, who I thought had a great line. She said, "Look, Obama can't attack the people, that is billionaires, the people whom he aspires to join, aspires to hang with," which I thought was hilarious and seemingly quite accurate about a guy who
wait a second.
Never stops taking vacations at Martha's Vineyard.
This is a guy who everybody told him within his own administration what you probably would have liked to have told him: don't do health care reform. Don't do it. We don't have the political capital. It's not going to help us. It's just going to get in the way of everything else. And he told people repeatedly, and you may disagree with this, Jim, but this was his perspective, that if I don't do this, tens of millions of Americans will never get insurance. It just won't happen. This is the time. This is the moment. This is what I want to do. Now, this doesn't sound to me like someone who puts politics first. It doesn't sound to me like someone who only cares about hanging out with zillionaires. So Maureen Dowd is wrong if that's what she thinks he's all about. And people will think he's just politically calculating. Now, maybe he made the wrong political calculation. In fact, Rahm Emanuel wanted him to be more calculating. But it just didn't happen that way. So these caricatures of Barack Obama are just that, caricatures.
Okay, there we have it. Maureen Dowd's wrong. David Corn's right. Got it.
Yeah, I'll take that debate.
And then how about Drew Weston?
Well, Drew Weston, he's upset the way a lot of progressives are upset that Barack Obama did not come in and act like he and govern as if he was Cornel West. And I won't tell people not to be upset about that, but if you look at whether it's fighting fights on healthcare, Wall Street, and the stimulus, and taking stands against the credit card companies. He hasn't. I would rather he'd be more a progressive champion than he has been, but I don't think he's a sellout because he hasn't, done that. I mean, his past, if you paid attention to it, didn't really lead anyone to believe that that's exactly what he would be. And we tend not to have presidents like that anyway, one way or the other. The conservatives ended up hating George W. Bush for a lot of reasons, and George H.W. Bush even more. If you want him to come in there and prosecute Bush and Cheney for war crimes and institute single payer and pull all the troops out of Iraq and Afghanistan immediately, you're going to be disappointed. And I don't begrudge people that disappointment, but that doesn't mean his presidency is shot to shit. To put it in technical terms.
Right. Fortunately, I think that the alternate history there is, who knows about the healthcare thing? I mean, that might have been the Congress driving it as much as anybody. is that the Obama administration does seem to have a strange propensity to hang out with billionaires, and to pray when he praises.
What do you mean?
Lloyd, well, I mean, he praises Jamie Dimon and Lloyd Blankfein. He seems unable to take seriously the problem of bailouts and banking bailouts and more bailouts and so on. I mean, I think again, I've said this before.
Did you not pay attention to what happened? To enacting the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau over opposition from the Republicans and from the entire banking community and Jamie Dimon, who yelled and screamed about that. You got to look at both sides.
You do have to look at both sides. So you mentioned Elizabeth Warren and the Consumer Protection Bureau, and I'll mention $137 billion bailout to General Electric. If I were GE, I'd rather have the $137 billion. I'll figure out the credit card regulations later, but I'd rather have the $137 billion loan guarantee, to be more precise.
Well, he gave bailouts to the auto companies, and you can argue whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, but it probably did save a bunch of jobs.
It might well have, but I just and
again, that was something that people say he doesn't take doesn't play hard and play tough, but that was where he had very few people outside of the UAW, but who wanted him to do that, including Democrats in Congress, and including independents hated it. Republicans held. Mitt Romney has done contortions over this because he wants to win the Michigan electorate. And so, again, I think the picture of Obama is rather complicated, and that may hurt him in the long run, because if people don't feel they have a strong sense of what you are, where you stand, they may not be inclined to vote for you. But just as a journal, and as a journalist or an observer, rather than as a cheerleader or a partisan, I recognize that that there's a lot. There's a lot to sort of dig out here and trying to sort through this guy and this administration. Now, Maureen Dowd gets paid for good quips, and good quips tend to be uncomplicated. And Cornel West gets paid. I'm not saying he does this for the money, but it's his job to be a provocateur and to be prophetic, as he says. You're going to have a hard time lining that up with working in Washington.
Okay.
I'm just saying there are different perspectives. But if people want to be mad at Obama for not shutting down Gitmo, they can be mad at him for that. But he gave it a shot, and Congress, including Democrats like Harry Reid, got in the way. And so what do? How many fights do you fight? All of them, some people might say. But then he may be more tactical in some ways, on some fronts, and less tactical in others.
I think we're seeing the outlines of the 2012 Obama re-election campaign here. Not that Dave was a part of it, but just that in terms of, well, look, he's not that bad. That's what it boils down to.
No. The 2012 campaign is going to be the other guy's really bad. I mean, listen, it's unemployment. It's over 9%. People are going to want change, right? People want and when they vote, they're going to want their vote to be seen as as doing something to make things better. And usually, in a bad circumstance, that means voting for somebody else. I mean, I think the Obama gang has a tremendous challenge in front of them. And if you look at the map, winning North Carolina again, Virginia again, a lot of these places is going to be really difficult. Where the Rust Belt is going to be really tough for them. So I have people who say that, that they're not worried. I think they about this. I think anyone who cares about the continuation of an Obama presidency ought to be damn worried. It doesn't matter, regardless, even if it's Michelle Bachmann.
I think it will be a tough race for the incumbent. Yeah. I mean, one of the most sort of howling errors I saw was this attributed to, and again, because I like the guy, I will just say attributed to, that Michael Beschloss, the historian, went to some retreat that Chief of Staff Daley organized.
Yeah, Michael Shear of Time Magazine reported this. Let's give
we'll
put that story up. I don't know, actually, maybe behind a paywall. Thank you, Tom. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Michael Shear, not the New York Times?
No, there are a couple of different Michael Shears. This is Michael Shear.
Okay, right. Okay,
he used to work at Mother Jones Magazine. Put that plug in.
Well, okay. Well, good for him. Look, Beschloss said, look, there's been two presidents who were reelected who went through hard economic times. Franklin Roosevelt and Ronald Reagan, and that sort of cheered the Obama people up. And of course, what they don't really say is that unemployment fell by 8.5 points under Roosevelt, and had fallen, several points under Reagan. So in other words, Obama unemployment's gone up. So I think some of the analogy there is a little weak. It's one thing to say you've come out of hard times and come out better for us. Another thing is you've been through hard times and come out worse for it.
It's still interesting. But what's interesting, I mean, I totally agree with that, and I think I just made clear that I believe this is a very uphill battle for Obama, just because of external circumstances. But what's interesting to me is when I look at polling, even now, even when we're almost 3 years past the last election, by overwhelming numbers, the public still blames, holds accountable Bush and Cheney for the bad economic times we're in now. I mean, this idea that the Republicans are out there bashing Obama, calling it the Obama Depression, and saying that indicating that his policies caused this. I mean, Jim, you're free with your bashing of Wall Street. I have yet to hear Michelle Bachmann or anybody else on that stage say a negative word about Wall Street. In fact, last night, what did Rick Perry call for? Freeing up Wall Street. So this gang has this ahistorical critique of the current situation. They don't talk about how subprime mortgages, sliced and diced by Wall Street, led to a financial crisis that then triggered the recession when the credit market seized and all sort of economic, the lifeblood of our economy froze and jobs were shed.
David, you might not be following the Republican race as close as I am, but I mean, first of all, just to be fair about this, Ron Paul was saying exactly this. I mean, there's actually an ad that Ron Paul is running.
He passed the bailouts, but he talks about having less regulation of business.
Right, but not only did he oppose the bailouts, but Ron Paul has an ad in which he cites a speech that he gave to the House Financial Services Committee in 2003.
Probably asking for silver dimes.
Well, maybe, but he also said, "Look, this is a Fed-created bubble, and it's going to pop, and it's going to be ruinous to homeowners and banks."
He's blaming the Fed there. He's not blaming the Wall Street. I was going to use the obscenity.
Michelle Bachmann.
When has she attacked? She attacks the bailout.
She attacks the Community Reinvestment Act.
No. I'm talking about Wall Street. Don't give me Fannie Mae, because all that happened after Wall Street was already down the road on these subprime mortgages. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac came into that picture after Wall Street started cutting up these subprime mortgages.
That's just the opposite.
No. It's in the FCIC report. It's again, put that aside. Listen, I'll give you this. It was Freddie and Fannie's total. They totally screwed everything up. Put that aside. Where is Michelle Bachmann ever saying anything about the banks and the privateers on Wall Street who did what they did and didn't understand what they were doing and the deregulation that let them get away with this?
She's done more than criticize them. She said she voted against the bailout in 2009.
No. You don't. I'm not talking about the bailout. When has she blamed people on Wall Street for getting us in the fix we're in today?
She
why is she not doing that on the end of the last debates?
If you make a bad bet and you lose, you shouldn't get bailed out. President Obama and John McCain and
she's going against politicians. She's not saying anything bad about Wall Street.
Deeds matter more than words. The fact is, when it counted.
Okay, then should she vote for Wall Street reform?
Goldman Sachs would have gone under if Bachmann had her way.
Has she advocated, letting Wall Street, not putting any restraints on these guys?
I think again, if you don't need restraints if you have failure, and it's her argument is, which I basically agree with, it's self-regulating if you don't bail them out. Now, so there was look, you can do whatever you want, just face the consequences. The catastrophe comes when you do whatever you want, and then we bail you out, which is the Barney Frank or Barack Obama position. And furthermore, I think, just to get the sequence right here, the Community Reinvestment Act goes back to 1977.
Yeah, but
it was expanded enormously in 1994. But to get the
sequence right too, Fannie and Freddie got into the subprime stuff after Wall Street did. It's just, I mean,
Well, okay, you're right. I mean, again,
Wall Street led the way here.
Okay, fine, but the point is they should have gone bust. You if you want to try something risky and crazy, you should pay the consequences.
The point is to say this is the economic problems we face today is because of Obama's policies is just simply not the case. We're not in this mess today because of Barack Obama's.
I'm not aware of anybody saying that.
Who called it the Obama Depression last night?
I don't know. Santorum, maybe. I don't know. I forgot.
So, they all blurs together. But
it all blurs together. But the point is,
they all start their critique. Their critique all begins when they're on the stage at January 20th, 2009.
No, it doesn't. I saw Bachmann on CNN this morning. This is Tuesday morning, the whatever today is, the 13th, but talking to Ali Velshi on CNN, saying it goes way back in both administrations. She said that on CNN 5 hours ago. So
again, who's she blaming?
She's blaming the moral hazard. Right. I mean, look, this is her opinion. I might put more blame on Wall Street myself.
Okay.
But her opinion, which I fully defend, is that it was, look, if you can do it, if you want to do crazy gambling and casino capitalism on your nickel, go ahead and do it. That's what people do in Las Vegas all the time. The trouble comes when we bail out. And then you say, well, we have to bail you out. Then you get some sort of pseudo-regulation.
That's really easy to say, but you have banks that have federal insurance. You're going to have to regulate. If you're going to have to deal with it. Banking is a regulated industry, part of it. Right. So if you want to say, do it on your own nickel, then you're going to have to put up firewalls like the old Glass-Steagall bill and say, okay, you guys, that's all separate over there. You go and have fun with your own money, but the banking we have here, you can't do that. So, if you don't, if you really believe that, if you want to have true freewheeling, the freewheeling market and casino gambling on Wall Street, you're going to have to put up the walls to protect people who don't want to be part of that because the walls were there and they were taken down.
And I agree with you completely.
Okay, was she in favor of doing that?
No, I don't think she is.
Okay.
But I am.
You and I, we're dinosaurs. We want to go back to...
No, the point is, I think it's coming. I think also what they should have done is if you did get... Look, I can even see the case... I opposed the bailouts in 2009. I'm sure we talked about it at the time.
Yeah.
But I can even see the case for the bailouts, but then you'd have to have genuine receivership, as in the entire top tier of executives get fired.
Yeah.
And we replace them with bureaucrats.
No, listen.
I can see the argument for sort of macroeconomic stability. Because, we can't let Bank of America fail. But if Bank of America does wind up going under again, and who knows what's happening, I don't want to start a panic here, but not that anybody...
Get your money out now!
I mean, Bank of America appears to be in a lot of trouble. And if the government winds up bailing it out...
Because of Countrywide and the mortgages. That's why.
Well, you're right. You're right. Again, I think it's not clear to me that Angelo Mozillo shouldn't be in a lot more legal trouble than he was. I mean, I think this was... I mean, the book to read, I don't think we talked about it, that came out over the summer. It's just Gretchen Morgenson, Joshua Rosner, Reckless Endangerment, which I think is a terrific book and should be required reading for everybody. And would leave you saying A, no bailouts, and B, if we are going to bail you out because of the deposit insurance, then yes, you can't be playing casino capitalism on some old lady's money. I agree completely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so we reached consensus on that. See, without even Barack Obama being in the room.
Obama could win or lose in 2012. We still agree. Yeah. By the way, I have a movie report to make.
Oh, please, let's do that before we finish up here.
Before we wrap up, Contagion.
Oh, don't give anything away because I am fascinated with this type of movie, and I saw the previews, and I want to say, gosh, I want to see that movie. So,
I think
thumbs up, thumbs down.
Definitely thumbs up. Huge, directed by Steven Soderbergh. A well-known director. And,
Ocean's 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, yeah.
57. Jude Law, Matt Damon, what's her name? Gwyneth Paltrow, Kate Winslet. I mean, great cast. And I wrote a piece on this for Fox, which I hope will be posted by the time this gets posted, on how the movie is actually sort of vexatious to both the right and the left. And it's vexatious to the left because it doesn't talk about health insurance; it talks about medicine. And it's vexatious to the right because it's clear that if you want to stop an epidemic like that, if we ever get one, and we haven't had one in a while, but the Spanish flu was not that long. It was 95 years ago,
Yeah.
so it's a while back, but still not like it's not like the Black Death or AIDS. These epidemics do come, and they are killers. And when you knew that, you need to know who people are, and you need to control your borders, and you need to know who your population is.
Well, you know what Ron Paul will say to that.
I do know what Ron Paul says.
I mean, he doesn't like the fence because he thinks it's going to keep us in. So if you have your silver dimes and you want to escape to Mexico, sorry, FEMA's at the borders and they're going to put you in a camp.
Now, one last question. Okay, so that's a movie. I recommend the movie. You should see it too.
Okay. I saw The Debt recently.
What do you make? I'm sorry?
I saw The Debt. That was my last movie I saw.
I know that.
And
I didn't see it.
It sort of happens in the past and in the present. And I thought the New Yorker review was pretty dead on, that the casting didn't sort of track, but it was a gripping story about what do you do when you've held a secret for 30 years, and when telling it will really screw things up for you, your family, and maybe even your nation. Wow. So I thought it was pretty good.
Okay, very, very good. Now, I'm intrigued what you think about all this stuff about the Iraq drawdown, and 3,000 troops we're now at 50,000 troops, or give or take, and what the plan is on the drawdown. They've been saying up down to 3,000 by the end of the year, and then they've said no, it'll be more like 20, and then Biden was quoted somewhere saying, well, Vice President Biden, that actually will be a drawdown, we're getting out, and so on. It was in Max Booth's piece yesterday in the Wall Street Journal, or the Weekly Standard, or something.
Yeah. Which I have to confess I did not read.
All right. So what do you make of what's going on Iraq? And Afghanistan.
Afghanistan. Well, as we're talking, Kabul is under a Taliban attack, and it's unclear how serious it's going to be. Students of the Vietnam War, especially conservative ones, say that the Tet Offensive wasn't that offensive. It just freaked out the American public, and had
when they were inside the U.S. Embassy.
Yeah, and had the effect that they wanted in terms of I guess politics and propaganda, and not so much so tactically. In a lot of ways, they blew their position, and it cost them too much, the Viet Cong.
Right. Viet Cong.
So when you see an attack like this in the Taliban, which seem to be reacting to recent statements by American commanders that the Taliban were weak, you don't know whether this is a sign of strength or whether it's a sign of desperation, right. And things are still playing out as we talk. I do know as a fact that the president is quite serious about sticking to his drawdown schedule there. I think he's willing to, on the numbers, he hasn't shifted since he announced it in June. That he may be flexible a little bit in some of the numbers depending on what happens. If it turns out this attack in Kabul is more serious and part of a longer offensive on the Taliban, then maybe I assume that will have an impact on maybe the drawing down. But you know what? Hold on a second. This is not good. We're going to have to finish up pretty soon because I just got the little, you only have a few minutes left sign.
Okay,
but anyway, so I think the president, has the intention, but will be flexible if things go bad there. But I still think it will be a downward slope. And it's interesting how Iraq is now, which once consumed us, has become such a back burner issue, despite the fact that we have thousands of troops there, and and they're still having acts of violence, and there's a lot of corruption in the government. My guess is that again, what Biden said was right in this instance, that there will be some, it's sort of we're going in for a bumpy landing in Iraq. Well, the plane may go up, the plane may go down with the winds, but they're still going to be drawing down troops. And but then they may be left with a higher number for a longer period of time, particularly if for the sake of stability, which is always a loaded term, which I hate to use, depending on what's happening with the Iraqi government and its own ability to have to keep some stability within the country.
Like the 22 pilgrims getting killed yesterday. Yeah.
I mean, it's tough. I mean, we know it's ultimately not our job, right? I think you and I agree to police these states. So the question is whether there is a real strategic need, because of course, I mean, I think as these countries also ask us to go or say they want us to go, they realize that our troops, particularly for the governments and for the people in power, pick up a lot of the work. and do a lot. They may be targets. They may create some. They may be a source of conflict as well, but they are, they're usually useful to the people in charge.
Yeah, I mean, it will be interesting. And again, I mean, it's clearly Vice President Biden on one side and Hillary Clinton and Leon Panetta on the other side. So we're told. And I guess President Obama will eventually have to be heard from on this. So, anyway.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting if Iraq becomes an issue yet again. I think from a political perspective, it's interesting that the Afghanistan war barely registers. I mean, seriously, did you hear much talk about it in the debates? I mean, I don't say that as a criticism, but as a barometer. People would just rather not think about it, and even more so, they'd rather not think about Iraq.
Yeah, I guess that's right. Anyway, all right.
Okay,
David,
well, Jimmy, this reunion went well. It was great.
Yeah.
Laughed, you cried. You got a movie review.
We'll do it sooner rather than later.
Especially for the big bucks we get. I mean, gosh.
Exactly.
I don't know how I went this long without a Blondeheads TV check.
If only card check had passed, then we'd be.
Yes.
We'd have a union. We'd be.
Yeah, we should. They'd
be outsourcing this to China right now.
With subtitles. Okay, well, you take care of yourself. Good luck to your lovely bride working with the show, Bachmann. That can't be an easy job.
It can't be an easy. No, it's everything's hard work. Everything we're doing, right, David?
Yes.